Tonight, we examine two political crossroads shaped by uncertainty rather than momentum. In Eastern Europe, Ukraine faces a painful strategic dilemma as new peace ideas surface, proposals that history suggests may be far harder to sustain than to sign. And in Britain, the Conservative Party confronts a different kind of test, not revival, but survival, as the right fragments and populism reshapes the political battlefield. I'm Rana Qassas and welcome to InFocus. As the war in Ukraine grinds on, Kiev is facing one of the most difficult choices any state can confront, whether enduring continued destruction is preferable to accepting arrangements that could permanently reshape its sovereignty. Recent proposals circulating in Washington and Europe suggest turning parts of eastern Ukraine, especially remaining Ukrainian-held areas of Donbass, into either a demilitarized zone or a demilitarized free economic zone. In theory, such zones would serve as buffer between Ukrainian and Russian forces. In practice, history offers few successful examples without robust enforcement mechanisms and mutual political commitment. Ukraine's leadership has made clear that it cannot accept legal recognition of Russian territorial claims, even if it may tolerate de facto control in the absence of military options. Unlike cases such as the Korean Peninsula, Russia refuses reciprocal withdrawal or credible guarantees, while Western powers have ruled out deploying troops to enforce any settlement. The core problem is trust. A buffer zone only works if both sides believe peace is preferable to further fighting. At this stage, Moscow appears convinced that time and battlefield pressure are working in its favor, while Kiev and its European allies doubt that territorial concessions would deliver lasting security. Joining us from Tampa, Florida, is Justin Thomas Russell, Executive Director of the Council on International Mediation and the Global Foreign Policy Center. And it's a pleasure to have you with me today in this very contentious, of course, a problem that's taking place, or more than a problem. And I'm happy we have you with us today. A very warm welcome, sir. Is there any historical precedent where a demilitarized zone succeeded without external military enforcement?
Well, it's always good to be with you, Rana. Look, the reality is that we are looking at, we're trying to look at this from a global one-size-fits-all kind of paradigm. And what we've got to realize is that, this is not something that we can put a round peg into a square hole. this is something that each individual situation is unique and has to be dealt with in very unique circumstances. In the case of Ukraine and in the case of the discussions that are going on right now, is this idea of a demilitarized zone in the Donbass is kind of ludicrous. It doesn't make sense. It would have to it would have a requirement that both sides would adhere to that. And in the case of Russia, and in the case of Vladimir Putin, he has no history, no record, or any credibility of standing by any of the agreements that he would sign on to. So this should be a roadblock from the get-go. And then the larger situation is if we're talking about a demilitarized zone in Ukraine, that still means that Ukraine would have to basically acquiesce to the demands of Russia, which is we're going to give away part of our sovereign territory that is recognized by the UN and international law. So it basically rewards or basically kind of nullifies any sort of discipline about any sort of bad actions that have been taken by Vladimir Putin and the Russian military over the past 3.5, 4 years.
Sir, why is Donbass so central, strategical, economical, and symbolical to both sides?
Well, I mean, for Kyiv, it's very simple. The Donbass is part of its sovereign recognized territory. It is recognized by just about every nation that recognizes Ukraine in the global community. So it's very important to Ukraine to say that this is our recognized border. This is recognized sovereign Ukrainian land. Why would we give that away as a result of an illegal and unjustified Russian interest? Russia wants it because it kind of expands Vladimir Putin's sphere of influence. It inches him closer to gaining back what the old Soviet Union had, which is basically what Vladimir Putin has said that he wants to do, is bring back Russia to its old Soviet Union superpower glory days. So it's very important that they've already got parts of Ukraine that were given away to them back about 12 years ago during the Obama administration, and now they're going to try and regain more of what was old Soviet bloc territory. So it's
And Mr.
important to
Russell, on
them.
the ground, they are gaining. Russia is gaining more and more every day.
Here's the thing about that, Rana, and I gotta be honest about this. There's conflicting reports coming back as far as what the gains look like. What in my analysis of it right now, I would say that it's pretty much a wash. Whereas Russia is gaining inch by inch in parts of the eastern Donbass, you also have to look at the fact that this is a very shallow win. For as much territory as they are trying to gain, which isn't a lot, they're losing a lot of soldiers per capita, more so than the Ukrainians are. And that's a problem. It's not sustainable. That's why Russia has to bring in North Korean troops. That's why they're recruiting troops from Africa and all over the Eastern Hemisphere. So there's a lot of issues as far as how much they're gaining and how effective it is. What we've seen in the past couple of weeks is we've seen the Ukrainians gaining a lot of strategic wins by hitting tankers in the Black Sea. They've been hitting
But
the
all
Russian sub.
analysts, Mr. Russell, deny this truth that you're saying now.
Well,
Or most of them, yeah, because you're one
well,
that's not denying anything now.
No, I understand what you're saying right now, and here's the thing is, people are going to analyze the data differently. In our analysis is at the Global Foreign Policy Center is that, quite frankly, Russia is winning shallow victories, but it's not sustainable. Everybody thought that Russia was going to run ramshot into Ukraine and own Ukraine in 6 months. We're going into the fourth, possibly fifth year of fighting with
And
no end
we're
in
still
sight. No,
discussing 26 and 27, the year 26 and the year 27. So there's still a long way to go when we
right,
discuss
the
this war. Whereas President Donald Trump said during his campaign, 24 hours and it's gonna end. Question I want to ask you, sir. Sir, is your analysis, and how do you read the backing off of the European Union on Ukraine and Zelensky, as well as backing off of the United States? Of course, the narrative of Donald Trump is it was the Biden administration that started this war, and he's not paying any more money in this war, and Ukraine is ending up now with what we're at, with the situation that we stand at.
Brandon, what we saw earlier was number one, the EU vote to back Ukrainian funding with, including seized Russian funds of about 90 billion euros, which is roughly about $100 billion worth of financial support to Ukraine. That's a nice little jolt in the arm for the Ukrainian government and for Vladimir Zelensky. What we saw in the debate leading up to the vote was a little bit of a crack in the unity of the EU in support of Ukraine. What we're seeing is what we would consider traditional kind of Putin-leaning countries. You're talking about the Czech Republic, Hungary. They tend to favor a little bit of a more stern leadership, much like Putin, and have had kind of sympathies toward Vladimir Putin in Russia. We're starting to see the EU kind of crack a little bit, but not enough to not continue backing. The big problem here is how the coalition of the willing, basically the NATO partners, such as Turkey, such as the UK, France, Germany, Italy, etc. How are they going to continue to push that kind of funding while looking at the big NATO partner here in the
Exactly, sir.
United
Is the
States?
promise of the NATO still offered to Ukraine?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, what you have to look at is Washington is all over the place. What the Europeans are realizing is they can't, if they are going to try and secure NATO, secure Ukraine, and prevent Russia from further aggression in Eastern Europe, excuse me, they're going to have to continue to do it themselves. And, if Washington comes in, that's fantastic. If Washington doesn't come in, it's still up to our European NATO partners to protect themselves. The big issue here is that Washington's policy on Ukraine has been like a roller coaster. It has been all over the place. One day it is kind of sympathetic to
Mr.
Vladimir
Russell, do you
Putin.
think the United States wants to back the EU?
Well, that's a very broad question. I mean, look, the United States supports the EU. I mean, there are partners, there are allies, there are NATO partners, there are trading partners, whether, Trump's in office, whether whoever's in office. There's a longstanding, the US and the EU are always going to be allies. Like any family, like any friendship, there's going to be times where they don't like each other all the time, but they never
At
stop
this
loving
point,
them.
they don't like each other. Okay, are proposals like free economic zones designed more to end the war or to freeze it, sir?
Look, here's the thing is, when we talk about mediation, when we talk about diplomacy, when we talk about negotiating the end to a conflict, not everybody is going to get what they want. That is diplomacy 101. That's mediation 1. The question is, at what point do we look at mediation to end a conflict without rewarding bad acting? Excuse me. If we're going to negotiate a deal, it's got to be a deal that both sides can mutually agree to, but there can't be an unset reward. The bottom line here is we can't give away parts of sovereign Ukraine to Russia and say, you know what, if we're going to stop this war, you can have parts of Russia, of Ukrainian sovereignty. But at the same time, that basically gives a war prize to Vladimir Putin for something that he did that the international courts have said is illegal, unjustified, and the UN has said that it violates UN charter. So there's a lot of factors in here that have to be observed in order to claim what the governing factor here is in mediating a long-term agreement
It's
or an end
really
to this war.
complicated, Mr. Russell, because from you, I want to ask you, Russia, the United States are always discussing Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump, always discussing this issue, which is a ceasefire or reaching a ceasefire or ending this war in closed doors without Zelensky. And Zelensky knows nothing about what's taking place, and then suddenly statements come up, so it's really complicated. However, is Russia negotiating from strength or trying to lock in gains before momentum shifts, sir?
The simple question here is no, not right now. Whereas Russia has a little bit of an advantage is it has the advantage of having a military that has longevity, that they can keep throwing bodies at it, not for very much longer, but they have a little bit more of a arsenal advantage over Ukraine. What we're seeing though is more and more the world is starting to continue to isolate a little bit Russia than it has in the past. As as long as Russia continues to say that we're going to take Donbass, whether by force or through diplomatic efforts, as long as Vladimir Putin continues to show that he's going to commit war crimes by targeting civilian assets, civilian targets, and the civilian population, as long as that continues to happen, Vladimir Putin's not making a lot of friends. That being the case, I don't think that there's a huge advantage for Russia in negotiating this, except for one factor, Donald Trump. You don't know
Sir,
where Donald Trump's headed.
because I'm running out of time in 10 seconds, are you pessimistic or are you optimistic about what's going on in this war that never ends?
I'm pessimistic. I don't think that we're going to see an end to this war in the next 6 months, let alone maybe even in the next 18 months.
Oh my God. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Russell, for your insights and for your informative and intellectual knowledge, and for, of course, on top of all your time and being with us and being with me in today's interview. Thank you so much. From a war where borders are contested by force, we turn to a democracy where political survival is now the central question, and where the struggle is not over territory but over relevance. 3 months ago, Britain's Conservative Party appeared to be approaching irrelevance, reduced to a parliamentary rump, financial strained, and eclipsed by Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Talk inside Westminster was less about recovery and more about replacement. Today, some in Conservative circles are whispering about a comeback, pointing to modest polling improvements under Kemi Badenoch and a sharper focus on fiscal restraint, tax cuts, and limiting the state. But the Financial Times warns that this optimism masks a harsher reality. The Conservatives' small polling bounce comes of the health history laws, and upcoming election in Wales, Scotland, and much of England are expected to be punishing. Reform continues to dominate the political agenda on immigration and culture, while Labour troubles have not yet translated into voter readiness to return to the Conservatives. At its core, The party's challenge is not revival but credibility. Badenoch's task is to prove that the Conservatives are not finished and that that Farage does not hold a monopoly on opposition to Labour. Whether the argument resonates beyond Westminster remains deeply uncertain. Joining us from London is Babaki Mamyan, an economics and political analyst. Welcome, sir, to the show. And sir, is talk of Conservative revival driven more by Westminster than by voters?
Well, thank you very much for your question. Politics is unpredictable, but I can say right now, politics is very unpredictable. The reason is because British politics was mainly dominated by two-party systems. So you had the Conservatives and the Labour, and totally they secured 80% of the vote. So each had 40% of the vote, and the 20% were divided among others. Right now, we have gone from two-party system to five-party system, even maybe to six-party system with a new party coming along. And each party is now averaging just under 20%. Of course, Reform is doing much better than Labour and Conservative. So the first point I want to make, it's very unpredictable. So if you tell me the Reform will be the next government, I would tell you possible. If you tell me Labour will hold on to their seats and be the next government, still be the next government, I would say possible. So it's very difficult right now to say exactly what is going to happen.
Okay, sir. From your own point of view, how damaging is Reform? And you mentioned that Reform now is taking over the Conservatives and the Labours. Why, from your own perspective, do you think so? And how damaging is Reform UK's claim that the Conservatives are politically finished? And why are they politically finished?
The reason why the two main parties, the Conservatives and Labour, have lost the trust of people because they have not delivered prosperity. And people don't trust them that they're able to do that. The Conservatives, my own party, had 14 years opportunity to do that. And for almost last year and a half, Labour hasn't done much better. So here is the cost of living is going up. There is no hope that the economy will improve. There is no clear policy how we are going to get out of this slow growth economy. So people are just going to any alternatives. It's not that they are in love with extreme parties, whether on left or right, because now the Green Party on the left is flourishing, and the Reform on the right. There is no reason either these parties can deliver. It's just out of desperation of people. People are desperate for some alternative, for somebody to come up with solution. They're just going to anyone right now. And this is bad state of politics right now in Britain.
So is the desperate people the reason behind the reforms becoming stronger? Or did the reform make a tactic forever, for example, that made them this strong when we come to discuss the whole issue?
Right now, as we discussed about people are desperate, Reform does not have clear policies or has no track record of being able to deliver good policies.
Based on what then are they taking over both parties?
Thank you for that good question. They have a very charismatic leader. Right now, politics has become about charismatic leaders. We have Nigel Farage in Reform, and I would say it's just a one-person party. If Nigel Farage tomorrow leaves, the shares, they say they now have something like 27% of the shares of people willing to vote for them, 27%, which is much more than 18 or 19% for Conservative and Labour. But if Nigel Farage is not there, they're not going to vote for Reform. Similarly, for the Green Party, which was doing about 5 or at best 6%, now they have Zach Polanski, a very charismatic leader, and they've gone up to 14%. So it's become politics of personalities. People,
Personalities or individuals, sir?
The reason is people they like to know a leader who they can trust that they would do what they say they would do. And
why do they trust Farage to this extent, sir?
Thank you for that. There is no reason they should trust Nigel Farage. The only reason they do it because they cannot trust the Conservatives after 14 years, and certainly they don't trust Keir Starmer after 18 months. So you could see it is not, they are going to Nigel Farage not because they trust him fully and they think they can deliver. They are sure in their opinion that the Conservatives, they did not deliver after 14 years. Why should they trust them? And the Labour is doing a very bad job as government right now. So what would the voter do? They go to somebody else.
Sir is competing with Farage, pulling the Conservatives away from mainstream voters?
Well, the way they are trying to cancel Farage is by attacking him constantly. So right now, Labour is constantly attacking the Reform. And also
is attacking him constantly working?
Constantly on his policies. And they are saying he has no clear policy. He has a one-issue politician, and his issue is anti-immigration. He has nothing else to offer, just anti-immigration. He's a single-issue politician. And you cannot have somebody to become the next prime minister on just purely one single issue. And
then it won't work. The reform won't work. If you say one issue is not going to make him a prime minister.
Well, then I go back to the beginning of our talks. It is so unpredictable right now. What you say makes sense, but politics is so unpredictable right now that if you tell me, is there a possibility for Nigel Farage, a single issue politician, to become the next prime minister of Britain? I would say yes, it's possible.
Okay, sir, is 2026 about rebuilding power or simply preventing extension?
Well, the May election, local elections, is very important. If Reform can unseat the Labour from what they are, if they can unseat them from the seats they are holding right now, then the momentum would help them to even go further. If Labour can hold on to the seats, it actually helps Conservative Party. It's very ironic. Now, Conservatives want Labour to hold on to their seats against Reform, because then it gives them more viability as another mainstream party. So there is that uncanny cooperation between the two parties, the main parties, to fend against the fringe parties right now. So in a way, the Tories, the Conservative Party, first of all, they want the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, to succeed on her immigration reforms, because if she succeeds on that, then they would take away the immigration away from Reform. Then Reform has nothing else to offer as much. So that would help politics generally, and it would help Tories also, the Conservative Party. On the other hand, the Tories, in a way, they want Labour to hold on to the seats. So there might be a lot of tactical votes that the
And you
Tories
never know, sir. Maybe to hold Labour to the seat, they can collaborate with the Conservatives. We never know. We're going to wait and see, and we're going to discuss more and more about this issue.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. You are about tactical voting for Labour.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babak Imamian, for your insights and valuable knowledge from contested borders in Eastern Europe to fractured politics in Britain. Tonight's stories highlighted the shared reality. Stability cannot be improvised, and recovery, whether national or political, takes far longer than a headline suggests. That's all for In Focus tonight, and thank you very much for the team that worked very hard on this script. I'm Rana Khassas. Thank you for watching.